Right, so hello, welcome in. Get yourself comfortable, sort the pillows out, do whatever it is you do before you settle, because we are going to be here for a good long while tonight, and there is genuinely no rush to any of it. I have watched Steven Universe all the way through more times than I would care to put a number on, and the funny thing is, every single time I go back to it, I come away with the same thought rattling around my head. For a show about magic space rocks who fire lasers out of their hands and live inside a giant statue on a beach, it is quietly one of the most emotionally honest things I have ever sat through. And I do not say that lightly. I have sat through a lot of telly. So that is what we are doing tonight. We are going to wander through this show slowly, character by character, and for each one I want to gently pull out the thing they are secretly about. Because that is the trick of this show, if you ask me. The lessons are not buried somewhere underneath the science fiction, hidden away for clever people to dig up. The lessons are the science fiction. The glowing rocks and the fusion dances and the war that happened thousands of years ago. All of it is just a slightly fancier way of talking about the most ordinary human things there are. Grief, self-worth, love that takes work, being told you were made wrong, waiting for someone who is not coming back. The lot. A bit of housekeeping before we get going, and then I promise I will not interrupt the calm again. If you find this sort of thing relaxing, the slow rambling lore at silly hours of the night, then it does help me a fair amount if you subscribe. That is the only time I will mention it. So you can let that thought drift off now, and not worry about it again. Quick lay of the land for anyone who has not seen the show or only caught bits of it. Steven Universe ran for a good few years as the main series, then there was a film, and then a sort of epilogue season called Steven Universe Future, which I will get to near the end because it is, honestly, the part that ties the whole thing together in a way I still find quietly devastating in the best way. We are not going to be encyclopedic about any of it. I am not going to quiz you. We are just going to drift through the characters one at a time, and if you fall asleep somewhere in the middle of the Gem Rebellion, that is rather the point. Each bit stands on its own. You will not miss some big twist by nodding off. There is no big twist coming. There is just a long, soft walk through a show I love and a lot of small true things about being a person tucked inside it. So let us start where the show sort of starts, with the calmest member of the team, who turns out to be the least simple of all of them. But let us talk about Garnet. Picture two small gems hiding in a cave from the rain. This is on Earth thousands of years ago, back when the planet was being carved up and colonized and treated, frankly, like a building site by people from very far away. And in the middle of all that, you have got these two. One of them is a sapphire, a sort of aristocrat with the ability to see the future, very calm, very composed. The kind of person who already knows how the conversation ends before you have started it. The other is a ruby, one of three identical bodyguards, hot-tempered, impulsive, not really anybody special in the grand scheme of things. They are not supposed to matter to each other. They are barely supposed to notice each other, and then it all goes sideways. There is a moment where the ruby, without thinking, throws herself in front of the sapphire to protect her, and the two of them accidentally fuse. They become one being just for a second. A sort of clumsy, three-eyed, cotton candy-colored person who has no idea what she is. And the crowd of important gems watching reacts the way crowds tend to react to something they have never seen and do not understand. Disgust, horror. Blue Diamond, who is more or less the boss of this whole operation, takes one look and sentences the ruby to be shattered for it, which in gem terms is about as final as it gets. So they run. The sapphire grabs the ruby and they leap off the edge of everything and land on Earth, and they hide in this cave and the rain comes down. And they have a conversation that I think about more than is strictly reasonable for a cartoon. Because the sapphire admits something. She says that she has seen gems fuse before, but she never realized that you sort of disappear into it. And the ruby says it has never been like that for her either. When she fuses with other rubies, it is, in her words, just her but bigger. Nothing new comes out of it. But this was different. This was someone else entirely. And there is a song. Because of course there is. This show runs on songs, and the song is called something entirely new. And the whole point of it is that little realization. that what they made together was not quite the ruby and was not quite the sapphire. It was a third person, a person who only exists because the two of them are together. They fuse again, on purpose this time, watching the rain stop and the sun come out, and they decide they would rather be that third person than go back to being two careful, separate, lonely things. That third person is Garnet. And here is the bit that I find quietly brilliant. For most of the show, before you know any of this, Garnet is just the cool one. She is the tall, quiet, sunglasses-wearing leader who barely says a word and is unshakably sure of herself. And then you find out that the calm is not the absence of feeling. The calm is two people in love, holding a steady conversation that simply never stops. When Rose Quartz first meets the newly formed Garnet, Garnet is full of panic and questions, asking if what she is allowed, if she is wrong, if she should split back apart. And Rose tells her not to question it. She tells her she is already the answer to all of those questions. And later Garnet tells Steven that the answer is love, which is a lot to put on a person you have known for 5 minutes, but it lands. Now, this is the part I love and the reason I wanted to start with her. It would be very easy for the show to make Garnet a fairy tale. Two halves of a perfect whole. Never a crossword. Sickeningly content forever. But it does not do that. There is a lovely episode where Ruby and Sapphire have a proper falling out. And Garnet actually comes apart at the seams because the two of them are arguing and cannot agree. And you suddenly see that Garnet is not one mind. She is two people who have chosen each other and who sometimes get it wrong and have to talk it through like anybody else. Garnet herself describes it best at one point. She says she is not two people, and she is not one person. She is a conversation. And I think that is about the truest thing the show ever says about being with someone. Because a relationship really does become its own thing, doesn't it? It is not just you. And it is not just them. It is a third thing that the two of you make together. And that third thing has its own personality, its own habits, its own little in-jokes, its own way of moving through the world. It is shaped by both of you, and over time it shapes you right back. You become slightly different people for having built it. Sort of like how you can always tell when two friends have been a couple for years, because they have developed this whole shared language that neither of them would have on their own. What Garnet quietly argues against is this idea a lot of us carry around, that love means losing yourself, that to be with someone is to dissolve into them and stop being you. And the show says, no, that is not it at all. Ruby is still Ruby in there. Sapphire is still Sapphire. They have not been erased. They have made something together that is bigger than either of them could be alone, and they get to step in and out of it, and they choose it over and over every single day. The fusion only holds because they keep choosing it. The second they stop choosing, Garnet comes apart, which is not a flaw in the system. That is the whole point of the system. There is a small thing I notice every time I rewatch the early episodes. Before any of this is ever explained, Garnet barely speaks. She is all quiet certainty, these short, steady lines, and you assume it is because she is simple, or stoic, or just the strong, silent type the way action heroes tend to be. And then you learn what she actually is, and you go back, and the silence reads completely differently. It is not emptiness. It is two people who have been together so long, they do not really need to narrate it anymore. They have arrived at that place some couples get to, where a glance does the work of a whole sentence, where the answer is already agreed before anyone bothers to say it out loud. The calm was never the absence of an inner life. It was a very full one, held quietly between the two of them, in a language only they speak. I find that genuinely lovely, the idea that what looks from the outside like a person who has it all figured out might actually be two people, in the dark, still working it out together, just very gently, and without much need for words. And it makes her the most reassuring presence on the whole show, because her steadiness is not a performance. It is earned between the two of them, one quiet conversation at a time. There is a fun little detail I always come back to. When Ruby fuses with other rubies, like I said, It is just a bigger ruby. Nothing new. And the reason is that they are two alike. They agree on everything, so there is nothing to negotiate, nothing to combine, no friction to make something out of. It is garnet who is interesting precisely because ruby and sapphire are so different. One all heart and impulse, one all patience and foresight. The thing they make is good because they are not the same, which feels like a small wink at all of us, really. The relationships that turn into something genuinely new tend to be the ones where you have to actually meet in the middle, where the other person sees things you do not. So that is Garnet. The calmest character on the show is underneath the most romantic idea in the whole thing. That love is not a feeling that happens to you and then you are done. It is a thing you build deliberately out of two different people, and you keep building it, and the building is the love. And when it works, you get to be something neither of you could have managed alone. I find that a very nice thought to drift on. That the steadiest, surest person in the room might just be a quiet conversation between two people who keep choosing each other in the dark. Now, since we are already talking about how these gems are made, and what it means to be made a certain way, let us go and sit with one who spent a very long time believing she had been made wrong. There's a place on the show called the Kindergarten, and I've always found it one of the eeriest things in it, which is saying something for a kid's cartoon. It is a canyon, a long, dusty, abandoned canyon, and the walls of it are covered in holes, gem-shaped holes. Each one is the exact silhouette of a creature that came out of it, like a mold left behind after the thing inside has gone. And dotted all over the place are these enormous machines, drills, and injectors. The things that made the gems by sinking down into the rock and draining the life out of the earth to grow new soldiers out of it. The whole place has this quiet, wrong feeling to it. Like a maternity ward built by people who did not care about the mothers or the babies or anything except the product at the end. This is where Amuthis came from. And for a long time, she is the one you would least expect to be carrying something heavy. She is the loud one, the messy one, the one who eats things she should not eat and turns chores into chaos and generally seems to be having a much better time than everyone around her. She is the comic relief, if you want to be reductive about it. And then you get an episode called On the Run, and the whole thing turns over. And you realize the joking was a lid on top of something she had been sitting on for a very long time. Because here is what Amuthis knows about herself. She knows she came out of that canyon. She knows that the kindergarten was, in the show's words, a bad place where bad gems grew more bad gems, the machinery of an empire strip mining a planet to make an army. So in her mind, she is a piece of that. She is one of the parasites. And worse than that, there is a detail about how she specifically was made. She came out late, hundreds of years later than she was meant to, long after all the other gems from her batch had emerged and gone. And coming out late meant she came out small. Smaller than a gem like her is supposed to be. Weaker, not the towering brute the mold was designed to produce. Later in the show, a gem called Peridot looks her over and just flatly calls her defective. Like it is a simple fact you could read off a label, and you can see it go through Amuthis like a knife even though she pretends it does not. So when Stephen, who is a child and means no harm, gets all excited and treats the kindergarten like an adventure, something in Amuthis snaps. She turns on Pearl. They have this brutal fight in the middle of all those empty holes, and the thing she keeps coming back to, the thing underneath all of it, is that she believes everyone secretly sees her the way she sees herself, as the bad thing, the mistake. At one point, she just cries out that she never asked to be made, which is about as raw as that show ever got, and it comes, like a lot of the best moments, with almost no warning, straight out of what looked like a silly little episode about a kid playing pretend. And Pearl, bless her, tries to help and does it clumsily, the way you do when someone you love says something that frightens you. She tells Amuthis she does not think of her as a mistake. She thinks of her as, and I am paraphrasing only slightly, a byproduct of a big mistake, which is not the save she thinks it is, and she knows it the second it leaves her mouth, and she scrambles to fix it. But what she gets to, eventually, is the thing that matters. She tells Amuthis that the kindergarten was not her fault, that out of the whole horrible mess of that place, Amuthis is the one good thing that came of it. And she had genuinely thought Amuthis was proud of that all this time, when really Amuthis had been quietly drowning in it. There is a follow-up to this that I think is even sadder and cleverer, an episode called Reformed, where Amuthis gets injured and has to rebuild her body, and she simply cannot settle on a form. She keeps coming back wrong, rushing it, basing each new version on what she thinks Garnet would approve of, or what she thinks would impress Stephen. And the penny that drops for Stephen by the end is that the real problem is not the injury at all. It is that Amuthis does not want to think about herself. She will do anything, throw herself into any fight, crack any joke, rather than sit still and consider who she actually is, because every time she looks at herself, she sees that canyon and those holes and the word defective. Now, here is the bit that I think is quietly important, and it is the reason I wanted to put her early, right after Garnet. The thing the show is very careful to say is that none of this was Amuthis' doing. She did not choose to come out late. She did not choose to be small. She did not choose the canyon or the machines or the empire that built them. The circumstances she was made in were handed to her completely, before she had any say in anything. And yet she walks around carrying them like a verdict. Like the conditions of her making are a judgment on her worth as a person. And that is such a recognizable thing, isn't it? When you take the space rocks out of it. So many of us walk around with some version of that. A sense that we came out wrong somehow. That something about the way we were made, the family we landed in, the start we got. The thing that went a bit sideways before we were old enough to remember. That all of it is somehow a mark against us. As if you could be held responsible for the weather you were born into. As if being shaped by something difficult is the same as being defective. What the show keeps gently insisting across Amuthis' whole arc is that the start is not the verdict. The lateness is not a flaw in her character. The smallness is not a measure of her worth. She is not a mistake. And she is not even the byproduct of one. Not really. She is a person who happened to come from a hard place. And the hard place is not her fault and does not get the final word on who she is. That distinction between where you came from and what you are worth is one she spends years learning, and you watch her get there in pieces, an inch at a time, which is the only honest way anyone ever gets anywhere with this stuff. There is a fun little thing I will leave you with on her. For all that she calls herself a runt, the show is very deliberate that her being small is also why she is so quick, so scrappy, so endlessly inventive in a fight. The thing she was taught to be ashamed of turns out to be inseparable from the thing that makes her her. Which is not the show telling you that your wounds are secretly gifts. Because that would be a bit naff and untrue. It is something gentler. It is just saying that the bits of you that came from the hard start are still you, properly you, and you do not have to hate them to be free of them. So that is Amuthis, the loudest gem in the room, who was quietly convinced she was the worst thing the room ever produced, slowly learning that the place she came from does not get to decide what she is. I find there is something steadying in that. The idea that whatever you were handed at the start, the verdict on you is still open and you are the one holding the pen. And speaking of changing your mind about something you were completely sure of, let us go and meet the gem who started out wanting to destroy the planet and ended up flying around it on a bin lid. I want to start this one with an image that makes me smile every time, which is a small, angry green gem flying around on the lid of a bin, because that is where Peridot ends up, and it is a very long way from where she starts. When you first meet Peridot, she is not funny at all. She is cold, she is clipped and efficient, and a bit terrifying. A homeworld technician who turns up to check on a doomsday device buried in the earth and treats the entire planet, and everyone on it, as a problem to be measured and then disposed of. She has these limb enhancers, this clever bit of kit that gives her long mechanical arms and legs, makes her tall, lets her project holographic screens, even turn her fingers into a little helicopter. She is, in that first stretch, genuinely menacing. The sort of villain who does not raise her voice because she does not think you are worth the effort. And then, bit by bit, the show takes all of that away from her. And what is underneath turns out to be one of the most lovable characters in the whole thing. The limb enhancers come off. Without limb enhancers, Peridot is tiny and actually shorter than Steven. She becomes this paranoid, sputtering little creature who is convinced everything is a weapon, who treats a tape measure like a death trap, who hides in the beach house and yells the word Claude at people as though it is the worst thing you could possibly call someone. She begs Yellow Diamond over a stolen broadcast to come and rescue her, and Yellow Diamond does not even particularly remember who she is, which is its own small heartbreak when you think about it. She has a complete meltdown when she realizes she is stranded on this planet she came to help destroy, with no way home and no one coming. And here is where it gets good, because the show could have left her there as a bit of comic relief, the defanged villain who makes everyone laugh. Instead, it does something braver and slower. It lets her change her mind. Not all at once. That is the part I really respect. She does not have one big tearful moment where she renounces her old life and joins the heroes. It happens in tiny increments over a lot of episodes, mostly through her actually getting to know the people she was sent to write off. She starts watching their daft human telly. She gets attached to a barn. She develops this whole obsessive love of a cheesy soap opera and gets into furious arguments about it, which is about the most human thing a person can do. And somewhere in all of that, almost without noticing, she stops being a gem who serves an empire and becomes a gem who has opinions of her own and friends of her own, and a sense that maybe the way she was raised to see the world was not the only way to see it. The turning point that always gets me is when she finally, openly, refuses Yellow Diamond, stands up to the most fearsome figure she has ever known, the entire authority she was built to obey, and says no. And it is terrifying for her. You can see it cost her something enormous, because changing your mind, properly changing it about something you were absolutely certain of, is one of the hardest things a person can do, and the show knows it. That is the lesson tucked inside Peridot, and it is one I think we are not very kind about as a species. We tend to treat changing your mind as a weakness, as flip-flopping, as proof that you did not really know what you were talking about in the first place. We respect the people who dig in and never budge, who hold the same view at 70 that they held at 17, as though consistency were the same thing as being right. And Peridot is the show's gentle argument that this is nonsense, that the ability to look at new information and new people and say, actually, I think I had this wrong, is not a failure. It is growth. It might be the single clearest sign that a person is still alive in there, still paying attention, still capable of learning. There is a lovely thread underneath the limb enhancers too, that I think about more than the gag deserves. She spends the early part of the show absolutely certain that those enhancers are what make her capable. They are her status, her tools, her power, the thing that makes her a proper Peridot and not just a little green nobody. And then they are gone, and at first she is helpless and furious about it. But over time she discovers that she is still clever, she is still inventive, she is still, in her own bizarre way, formidable, building little drones to guard the barn, working out how to use her own latent abilities to drag metal around, and yes, eventually, to fly about on a bin lid like it is the most natural thing in the world. The armor was never where the capability lived. It was in her the whole time. She just had to lose the armor to find that out. I find that a quietly reassuring thing, personally. The idea that the stuff you think you need in order to be worth anything, the title, the kit, the role, the thing on the business card, might not actually be the source of what you can do. That you could lose all of it and find you are still you, still able, still here. Peridot does not get smaller when she loses her NH Peridot does get smaller when she loses her enhancers. You off with on her, and I mean this warmly. A lot of autistic viewers have written over the years about seeing themselves in Peridot, in the way she experiences the world, the intensity, the special interests, the way she has to learn the unspoken rules of feeling that everyone around her seems to already know. The actress who voices her has talked about people coming up to her at events to say that watching Peridot helped them through their own difficult moments. And I do not think that was a calculated thing the show set out to do. I think it just happened the way it happens when you write a character with enough honesty and enough affection that real people can climb inside them and feel at home. Which is sort of the whole show in miniature, really. So that is Peridot, the villain who turned out to be a slightly anxious gremlin with a heart of gold and a deep love of trashy television, who taught the show and us that there is no shame in looking at the world afresh and admitting you got it wrong. Changing your mind is not losing. Sometimes it is the bravest thing in the room. Now, from a gem who learned to let go of who she was told to be, let us go and sit for a while with one who could not let go of someone she loved. Let us talk about Pearl. There is a moment, fairly early on, where Pearl is alone and thinks no one is watching, and she summons up a hologram of Rose Quartz, a projection of the woman she loved who is gone, and she stands there, and she has the hologram say lovely things to her, things Rose once said for real, and she just lets herself live inside the memory for a minute, talking to a ghost made of light. I have always found that one of the most quietly devastating things in the show, and I want to start with it because it tells you everything about Pearl before we get into any of the lore. This is a person who lost someone and never put it down. Pearl, if you do not know her, is the elegant one, the graceful, fussy, slightly anxious one, brilliant with a sword, forever tidying, forever worrying, and the great ache running underneath all of it is Rose. Rose Quartz was the leader of their little band of rebels, the one they all followed, and Pearl loved her. Loved her in a way the show's careful not to be coy about, even if it was a love that was never quite returned in the shape Pearl wanted. And when the show begins, Rose is already gone because she gave up her physical form so that Steven could exist, which means Pearl is raising the living reminder of the person she lost every single day, and helping him, and protecting him, and grieving the whole time underneath. You learn over the course of the show that this goes back a very long way, and that it is more complicated than simple devotion. There is a backstory here, which I will not unpick in full tonight, about who Pearl originally was and who Rose originally was, but the short of it is that Pearl was made to serve, and Rose freed her from that, and Pearl never quite worked out how to want anything for herself after that, because the thing she had been freed into was loving Rose. There is a song called Sworn to the Sword, where there is a song called Do It For Her, where she essentially teaches a child that the most noble thing you can possibly do is throw yourself in front of the person you love and treat your own life as worthless next to theirs. Arlie gets herself badly hurt taking the lesson to heart, and Pearl has to confront the fact that what she called devotion was actually a kind of self-erasure she had been carrying for thousands of years. And then there is the grief on top of it. There is an episode where Pearl discovers that Rose kept secrets even from her, after a whole life of believing she was the closest person to Rose in the world, closer than anyone, and it breaks something in her. Because if she was not even the keeper of all of Rose's secrets, then what was she? And much later there is a song called It's Over, Isn't It? Which is, for my money, one of the finest things the show ever made, where Pearl finally puts words to the whole tangle. The fact that Rose chose a human man, Greg, in the end. The fact that Pearl spent all that effort being everything she could be for someone who was never going to choose her back in that way. The fact that the person is gone now and the wanting has nowhere to go. It is a song about being haunted, sung by someone who has been haunting herself for years. Now, I want to be careful here, because the show is careful here, and I think it is one of the braver choices it makes. It does not present Pearl's devotion as beautiful. A lesser show would have. A lesser show would have made the grieving widow noble and tragic and left it at that. A lovely, sad woman carrying a torch forever. Very romantic. Roll credits. Steven Universe does not do that. It lets Pearl's grief be genuinely unhealthy. It lets it be the thing that keeps her stuck, that stops her from becoming a full person in her own right, that has her summoning holograms of a dead woman in an empty room because she cannot bear to face a version of her own life where she is the main character. The grief is real and it is honored, and it is also clearly a trap she has built around herself, and the show trusts you to hold both of those things at once. And the lesson in there, the one I think is genuinely worth carrying, is this: you can love someone for the rest of your life, truly and completely, and still have to become a person who is not only defined by them. Those two things are not in conflict, even though it feels like they are. Pearl's mistake, if you couldn't even call it a mistake, is treating her love for Rose as her entire identity, as though to move forward, to build a life of her own, to want things again, would somehow be a betrayal of the love, as though the only way to prove you really loved someone is to stop living once they are gone. And that comes up for so many of us in much smaller and quieter ways. Grief that never got let out has a way of becoming the room you live in. You can lose a person, or a relationship, or even just a version of your life that you thought you were going to have, and then organize everything else around the loss without ever quite noticing you are doing it. You keep the room exactly as it was. You do not move anything. You let the absence become the shape of your days. And it feels loyal. It feels like the right thing, like the respectful thing. But there is a difference between honoring something and being imprisoned by it. And that difference is the whole of Pearl's journey. What is lovely is that she does slowly get somewhere. Not by forgetting Rose, you never forget. That is not how it works, and the show would never insult you by pretending it is, but by learning over a long time and with a lot of stumbling that she is allowed to exist for her own sake. That moving forward is not the same as leaving Rose behind. That you can carry someone with you and still walk. By the later parts of the show, you can see her starting to want things again, to have her own life, to be Pearl rather than the place where Rose used to be. And there is something quietly triumphant in that, in the smallest and least showy way. One more thing I will leave you with, because it is the kind of detail this show does so well. The person who could most deeply understand Pearl's grief over Rose is, of all people, Greg, the very man who came between them, the one who Rose chose, because he loved her too and he lost her too. And he is carrying his own version of the same whole. And there is this slow, awkward, beautiful thawing between the two of them over the years, two people who could have spent forever resenting each other, slowly realizing they are the only two who really know what the other one is missing. There is something very true in that sometimes the person who shares your loss is the person you least expected, and that grief, which isolates you so completely, can also quietly connect you to someone if you let it. So that is Pearl, the most graceful person on the show, haunting an empty room with a hologram, learning across 1,000 years and then a few more that you can love someone forever and still, at long last, have to become yourself. It is a slow lesson and a hard one, and she earns every inch of it. Now, since we have wandered into the subject of Rose and the man she chose, let us go and sit with that man for a while, because Greg and Rose have something to teach us about love that is far less tragic than all this, and a great deal funnier. I want to start this one with a conversation, because it is one of my favorite bits of dialogue in the whole show, and it is between a nervous bloke who washes cars for a living and a literal alien. He asks her if she has ever loved other humans. She says yes. He asks if she has ever been in love with one. There is a pause, and then he just blurts out, "It's torture, the worst." And she steps back, a bit stricken, and says she is so sorry. And he says, "No, don't be." And she says, "Why not? I'm so confused." And he laughs and says, "Me too." And then they decide that being confused together is the one thing they have in common, and somehow that is enough to build on. That is from an episode called We Need to Talk. And it is, on the surface, the love story of Steven's parents. Greg Universe, this scruffy, sweet, going nowhere musician with a van, and Rose Quartz, an ancient gem who has been alive for thousands of years and is, in the most literal possible sense, not from around here. And what I love about how the show handles it is that it refuses, absolutely refuses, to let it be a fairy tale. Because for a while it is a fairy tale, and the show shows you that on purpose so it can pull the rug. Early on, Greg and Rose are doing all the things that couples in films do. They are laughing, they are dancing on glowing floors, they are swept up in the whole heady romance of it, and Rose is playing a part, a bit. She is doing the manic, magical, mysterious woman thing, treating the whole relationship like it is just meant to be fun, a lovely game. At one point, she even fuses with Pearl right in front of Greg, partly to show off, partly, you suspect, to make him a bit jealous, which is a properly petty thing to do, and I appreciate the show for letting Rose be petty. And Greg, to his enormous credit, is the one who stops and says, "Hang on, this is lovely, but we do not actually know each other. We are doing all the moves of being in love without any of the substance of it." And there is this gorgeous, vulnerable bit where he basically pleads with her to tell him whether he is actually special to her, or whether he is just the latest in a long line of humans she has been charmed by and will outlive. And Rose, who has never had to think about it like this, says something that has stuck with me for years. She says, "I'm not a real person," which means a lot of things at once. It is about the gap between a gem and a human, between someone who lives forever and someone who does not. But it is also, I think, an admission that she has never had to be a real person with anyone. She has always been the legend, the leader, the magical figure people fall for. Nobody has ever asked her to just be known. And the thing that turns it from a doomed romance into a real one is that they decide to do the work. That is the whole pivot. They stop performing the relationship and start actually building one by asking each other questions and answering them honestly, which sounds like the least romantic thing in the world and is, of course, the most romantic thing in the world. Garnet, who is watching all this from behind a sculpture because she is incapable of minding her own business when love is involved, sums it up with a line that I think might be the thesis of the entire show. She says, "Love takes time, and love takes work." And Rose Quartz said, "Love takes time, and love takes work." A story aimed at children, or honestly, in a story aimed at anyone. We are sold the other version constantly. The version where love is a lightning strike, where you meet the right person and it is effortless and you simply know. And if it is hard, then it must not be real. We get the montage, we get the spark, we get the wedding and the credits, and the show looks at all of that and goes, that is the easy bit. The spark is easy. Anybody can have a spark. The actual love, the thing worth having, is what happens when the spark has faded and you are two confused people from two different worlds sitting in a van trying to genuinely understand each other. On purpose, day after day. Because you have decided the other person is worth the effort of knowing. There is a small detail I find quietly perfect. Greg and Rose never managed to fuse. Other couples on the show fuse. It is the big visual metaphor for two people becoming close. But Greg is human, and it does not work for them. And yet Garnet says the bond between them is real anyway. That the fusion not working does not mean the love is not there. Which I read as the show saying, the grand magical gesture is not the proof. The proof is in the choosing, in the staying, in the daily unglamorous business of learning a person. You do not need the fireworks to have the real thing. Sometimes the real thing is two people in a van, confused, who have decided to be confused together for as long as it lasts. And that lasting is part of it too, the bittersweet part. Greg knows, going in, that he is in love with someone who will outlive him by a frankly absurd margin. He is signing up for a love that has loss built into it from the start. And he does it anyway. There is something very brave and very human about that. Choosing to love something you know you cannot keep forever. Deciding that the having is worth the eventual losing. Which is, when you scrape away the alien of it, just what all of us are doing all the time. Loving people we cannot keep. Because the only alternative is not loving them. And that is no alternative at all. I think the reason this one sits so well with me is that It is the show being kind about something it could easily have been cynical about. It would have been very easy to make the immortal alien and the dead-end musician a tragedy, or a cautionary tale, or a bit of a joke. Instead, it makes them a quiet little instruction manual. Love is not a thing that happens to you fully formed that you then either have or do not have. It is a thing you make, slowly, out of attention and honesty and a willingness to keep showing up to the conversation even when it is awkward and you do not know the answers. It is confusing and it is work, and the work is not the obstacle to the love. The work is the love. A nice little thing to drift on, that. The idea that the people who got it right were not the ones who had it easy. They were the ones who sat in the van and did the work. So that is Greg and Rose. A car washer and an ancient alien who could have been a fairy tale and chose instead to be something better and harder and truer. Now, from a love that is built on honesty, let us go to the other end of the scale entirely and talk about what happens when closeness is built on control instead. Let us go and find Lapis. Let us start with a mirror. When Lapis Lazuli first appears, she is not a person, as far as anyone can tell. She is a mirror, a talking mirror, an old gem artifact that Pearl CAA's talking mirror, an old gem artifact that Pearl carries around and uses as a tool, that can reflect things back, replay sounds and images, and even communicate its own thoughts and feelings. And the glass. There has been the whole time, a whole person, conscious, awake, stuck inside an object for thousands of years, able only to watch and echo, unable to move or speak for herself or do anything but reflect. When Stephen finally frees her, the relief of it is enormous. And also you realize with a bit of a lurch just how long she was in there, and what that would do to a person. That is the thing to hold on to with Lapis. Before anything else happens with her, she has already survived something that would break most people. She was caught in a war she did not start, mistaken for the enemy, poofed and imprisoned, and then forgotten. Left in that mirror through thousands of years of history while the world moved on without her. By the time we meet her properly, she is already carrying more than anyone should have to. And then the show does something that I think is genuinely bold for a kids program, which is that it does not make her trauma make her gentle. We have this comforting idea, sometimes, that suffering makes people kinder, that the wounded become soft and wise. And sometimes it does. But sometimes the thing that survives the wound is angry and frightened and desperate, above all else, to never feel that helpless again. And that is Lapis. Which brings us to Malukite. And I want to handle this carefully because it is one of the most quietly upsetting things in the show. After everything, Lapis ends up fusing with another gem called Jasper, a brutal soldier who wants the power that fusion brings. And the fusion they make, Malukite, is nothing like Garnet, where Garnet, as we talked about earlier, is two people in love holding a steady conversation. Malukite is two people locked in a war. It is a monster, unstable, violent, full of hate. And the reason it forms is not love at all, it is that Lapis sees a chance to take control. She fuses with Jasper and then immediately turns it against her, chaining the fusion up and dragging it down to the very bottom of the ocean, holding Jasper prisoner inside their shared body for months. And the most chilling thing about it, the bit the show is brave enough to say out loud later, is that Lapis admits she enjoyed it. After a lifetime of being the helpless one, the one in the mirror, the one things were done to, she finally got to be the one holding someone else down. She got to take all that buried anger and aim it at a target. And it felt, for a while, like power, like safety, even. Like finally being the one in charge instead of the one being controlled. There is a detail here that I love, partly because the show stumbled into it by accident. Malachite the mineral, the actual stone, is toxic. Malachite the mineral, the actual stone, can make water toxic if enough copper leaches out. They named the fusion. It was just a lucky coincidence. But it could not be more fitting, because that is exactly what this is, a poisonous thing, submerged. Lapis took the worst relationship of her life and pulled it to the bottom of the sea and called it control. And the whole time she was down there in the dark, drowning right alongside the person she was trying to drown. And that is the lesson sitting inside Lapis. And it is one I think a lot of people quietly need, because it is so easy to mistake one of these things for the other. When you have felt powerless, really powerless, the most natural pull in the world is towards control. You promise yourself you will never be that vulnerable again, never be at anyone's mercy again, and so you start gripping. You grip the people around you, the situations, the outcomes, anything you can get your hands on, because the gripping feels like safety. It feels like the opposite of being in that mirror. But control and safety are not the same thing, and Lapis is the show's way of showing you the difference. Holding someone else underwater so that you can feel in charge does not make you safe. It just means you are underwater too. You cannot let go, because letting go feels like losing the only power you have, and so you stay down there in the dark, gripping, both of you suffering, and you call it protection. The grip that was supposed to keep you safe becomes the thing that keeps you trapped. What makes Lapis's story matter, though, is that she gets to choose something else. Eventually the fusion is broken, and Jasper, true to form, comes back and begs her to do it all again, to become malachite, to go back to that horrible, intoxicating dynamic. And Lapis says no. It is one of the most important no's in the whole show. She looks at the thing that gave her a feeling of power, the thing that let her finally aim her anger somewhere, and she turns it down because she has worked out that it was never making her better. It was just another version of the mirror. And then there is the long, slow, unglamorous work of actually healing, which the show does not rush and does not pretend is easy. She goes to live in a barn, of all places, with Peridot, the very gem who once helped drag her back to Earth against her will. And the two of them slowly, awkwardly become friends. There is a moment where Peridot, trying to be kind, builds Lapis a swimming pool, not realizing that water is the last thing Lapis wants, anywhere near her, because water is where she was malachite. Water is her tomb. And Lapis has to explain that the thing meant as a gift is a reminder of the worst time of her life, which is such a real and small and human bit of trauma. The way the people trying to help you sometimes hand you exactly the wrong thing, with the best of intentions, because they cannot see inside your head. But she does heal, in pieces, on her own timeline. She makes art, she makes a friend, she slowly stops avoiding water. And by the end she chooses, freely, to stand and fight for the planet she once helped threaten, not out of anger this time, but out of something steadier. The gem who started as a reflection in a mirror, with no voice of her own, ends up choosing her own side, on her own terms. I find there is something genuinely hopeful in that, underneath how heavy it all sounds. Because Lapis is the show saying that even the relationship you let yourself drown in is not the end of your story. That you can put down the grip you mistook for safety, and it will feel like losing. And it is not losing. It is the start of actually coming up for air. So that is Lapis, the gem who survived the mirror only to build herself a worse prison, who learned the hardest possible way that holding someone down is not the same as being free, and who eventually, slowly, chose to let go. Now, from the wrong kind of closeness, let us go back to the right kind and talk about two people who got it exactly right, by simply checking in with each other. Let us talk about Stephen and Connie. Garnet has a line that I think about a lot, and I want to build this whole section around it, because it is doing more work than it lets on. She says, you are not two people, and you are not one person. You are an experience. Make sure you are a good experience. She says this to Stevoni, who is what you get when Stephen and his best friend Connie fuse together for the first time. And I love that the show makes Stephen's closest relationship, the one that the whole back half of the series quietly orbits. A friendship between two kids that grows up alongside them. Connie is human, like Stephen is half human, And the two of them just sort of fit. They read books together, they train together, they trust each other completely. And in an episode called Alone Together, they are messing about, dancing, and they accidentally fuse, and out of it comes this taller, older, slightly stunned new person who is both of them at once. Now, we have already talked about fusion as the show's big metaphor for closeness, so I will not go back over all of that ground. The thing that makes this particular fusion special, the reason it is worth its own section, is what Stephen and Connie do while they are fused. They keep checking in with each other. Quietly. Constantly. The whole time. Through Steveni's voice, they keep making sure the other one is still comfortable, still happy to stay fused, still in. It is never a single decision they make once at the start and then forget about. It is a thing they keep choosing moment to moment the entire time they are together, and the show puts that gentleness right next to its opposite, on purpose, so you cannot miss the point, because Stevoni goes to a party, full of the joy of having this new body and being out in the world, and a lad called Kevin starts dancing at them, and will not stop, and will not take a hint, and will not back off when they tell him to leave them alone. He keeps pushing, keeps pressuring, treats their discomfort as a challenge to get past. And it is genuinely unpleasant to watch, in a way the show clearly intends. Stevoni ends up reclaiming their own space, dancing at Kevin in this deliberately awkward, defiant way until he gives up, and in the process they come apart back into Stephen and Connie on their own terms, which is the whole point. They took their power back. They decided when it ended. What the show is doing here is one of the cleverest things I have ever seen a kids program attempt, which is teaching the idea of consent without any of it being about sex at all. It never has to be. It is all in the dancing, in the fusing, in the checking in, and the lesson lands so cleanly precisely because it is not about one specific act. It is about a whole way of being with another person. The idea that closeness should be chosen again and again, and that the choosing matters as much as the closeness. That you can be profoundly joined with someone, sharing a body even, sharing a self, and still be two whole people who each get to say yes, and just as importantly, who each get to say no. There is a follow-up to this that I think is even better. An episode where Stephen and Connie are training as Stevoni, and the fusion keeps falling apart, and it turns out the reason is that they are each carrying things they have not been honest about. Connie has guilt she has not faced. Stephen has guilt he has not faced about people he could not save, about a disapproving image of his own mother that he carries around in his head. And the fusion literally cannot hold while they are hiding things from themselves and from each other. The only way they get it back, the only way Steveni becomes stable, again, is by being honest. By Connie telling Stephen that he has to actually feel how bad he feels before he can move through it. The closeness only works on a foundation of honesty. The second they start performing being fine, the whole thing destabilizes, and they fall out of the sky. Which, when you sit with it, is just true of people, isn't it? The relationships that last are not the ones where you pretend to be fine to keep the peace. They are the ones where you can be honest about the not fine bits, and the other person can hold that, and the closeness is built on the truth rather than on a performance of the truth. Stevoni falling out of the sky because Stephen will not admit how he feels is about as good a picture of that as I have ever seen. And there is something quietly radical in making this Stephen's central relationship too. Because the show could have given him a grand romance, all sweeping and dramatic. Instead, it gives him a friendship that deepens slowly over years into something more, built on trust and honesty and a frankly enormous amount of mutual respect. The two of them are equals. Connie is not a prize Stephen wins or a sidekick who tags along. She is a whole person with her own life, her own goals, her own future, and the show is very clear that Stephen has to make room for all of that, rather than expecting her to orbit him. Their closeness never asks either of them to become smaller. If anything, it asks them to become more themselves, which is, I think, the only kind of closeness worth having. The lesson, then, is a gentle one, and it is the opposite of the one we found with Lepus a moment ago. Where Lepus showed us closeness built on control, Stephen and Connie show us closeness built on consent and honesty. The difference between the two is not how much you feel for the other person. It is whether you keep choosing each other freely, whether you keep checking that the other one is still in, whether you can tell each other the truth without the whole thing falling apart. You are an experience? Garnet says. Make sure you are a good experience, which is about, Garnet said, make sure you're a good experience, and about being close to another human being. And it came out of a cartoon in the mouth of a magic rock aimed at children. A nice thing to drift on, that one. The idea that the people who love you best are not the ones who hold on tightest, but the ones who keep gently asking if you're alright, and actually wait for the answer. So that is Stephen and Connie. Two kids who fused by accident and turned it into the show's quiet masterclass on what it means to be close to someone without ever taking them for granted. Now, from a relationship built on honesty, let us talk about what happens when people who love each other genuinely disagree, and what it costs to make that disagreement disappear. Let us go to the forge and find bismuth. There is a forge inside a volcano, glowing orange, full of weapons, and a big, warm, brilliant gem hammering away at an anvil. That is where I want to start, because the warmth of it matters for how the episode lands. Bismuth is, when you meet her, a delight. She is one of the original crystal gems, one of Rose's old comrades from the rebellion, lost for thousands of years and then found again. And when she comes back, she is everything you would want. She is funny, she is generous, she is a master craftsman who forged the weapons that the gems still use. She takes one look at Stephen and tells him something genuinely lovely, which is that he should not waste his time trying to live up to his mother. He can be someone even better, she says. He can be himself. And she means it. She offers to make him a weapon of his very own, and there is this gorgeous stretch where it feels like Stephen has found a new friend, an old soul who really sees him. And then she shows him what she has been building. She calls it the breaking point. And it is a weapon designed to do something the gem's other weapons cannot do. Normally, when you defeat a gem, you poof them. You destroy their physical form, but the gem itself, the actual stone, the person, survives and can come back. The breaking point does not do that. The breaking point shatters the gem itself. It kills, permanently. And bismuth is proud of it. She sees it as the thing that could have won the war, the edge they never had, and she wants Stephen to take it up and use it against Homeworld. And Stephen says no. He says that using a thing like that would make the crystal gems no better than the empire they are fighting. And this is where the episode turns, because bismuth goes very still, and then very angry. And she tells him that this is exactly what Rose said too. When bismuth first showed Rose the breaking point, all those thousands of years ago, Rose refused it as well. And from that, bismuth has concluded that Stephen is, and from that, bismuth has concluded that Rose was a hypocrite, someone who talks about protecting her people, but will not give them the one weapon that might actually keep them alive. Out all this old fury about being told her anger did not count, about being asked to fight a war with one hand tied behind her back by leaders who would not do what it took to win. Now, I want to be fair to bismuth here, because the show is fair to her, and that is what makes the episode great. She is not a villain. She has a real point. She watched her friends get shattered in that war, killed permanently, by an enemy who had no such qualms, and she is asking why her side should hold itself to a standard the other side does not. That is a serious question. People have been arguing about that exact question in much realer wars for the whole of human history. The show does not pretend she is simply wrong and Stephen is simply right. It lets her be a good person with a genuine grievance who has arrived at a conclusion Stephen cannot accept. But here is the part that turns the whole episode from a debate into a tragedy, and it is the bit I actually want to talk about. At the end of the fight, in despair, bismuth points. At the end of the fight, in despair, bismuth points the breaking point at Stephen and tries to use it on him. Ven is forced to poof her with his mother's sword to save himself. And as she goes, she says something that recontextualizes everything, because Stephen promises her, in that moment, that unlike Rose, he will tell the others what happened. He will not hide it. And her last words are, then you really are better than her, because that is the thing. Back during the war, when Rose and Bismuth had this exact same argument, Rose did not win it through honesty. Rose poofed Bismuth, bubbled her away, and then told everyone that Bismuth had been lost to the enemy. She made the disagreement disappear. For thousands of years, Garnet and Pearl and everyone else believed Bismuth was simply gone, a casualty of the war, when really she had been sitting in a bubble in the basement the whole time because she and Rose could not agree, and Rose decided that the easiest way to deal with the disagreement was to make the person holding it vanish. And that, for my money, is the actual lesson of the episode, and it is a hard and useful one. The failure here is not that Bismuth was wrong. The failure is that Rose, faced with someone she loved, holding a view she could not accept, chose to silence her rather than sit in the discomfort of the disagreement. She bubbled the argument instead of having it, and the cost of that was enormous. It was a friendship buried for thousands of years. It was a whole group of people grieving someone who was not even dead. It was Bismuth waking up convinced that nobody had. It was Bismuth waking up convinced that nobody had ever valued her. Because the truth of why she was bubbled had been hidden from everyone except Bismuth herself. Her version of that temptation. When someone we care about holds a view we cannot stand or raises a problem we do not want to face, the easy move is to make it go away. Not literally bubble them, obviously, though some days. But we change the subject, we freeze them out. We decide they are just being difficult. We avoid the conversation, and we tell ourselves we are keeping the peace, when really we are just bubbling the disagreement in the basement and hoping it stays down there, and it works for a while, until it does not. Until the unspoken thing rots whatever was between you. What Stephen offers, in that small promise as Bismuth fades, is the alternative. He says he will tell the truth. He will let the disagreement be real, out in the open, where everyone can see it and grieve it and deal with it properly. He will not pretend it did not happen, and that is why she says he is better than Rose, not because he agreed with her. He did not. He still would not use the breaking point. He destroys the thing, in the end, but he will not lie about why they disagreed, and he will not make her disappear to avoid the awkwardness of having loved someone he could not see eye to eye with. That distinction is the whole thing. Loving someone does not mean you will always agree with them. It cannot. And the test of whether the love is any good is not whether you avoid the disagreements. It is whether you can have them honestly out loud and let the other person remain a real person even when you cannot give them what they want. Being heard is not the same as being agreed with, and people can survive not getting their way. What they struggle to survive is being silenced, being made to vanish, being told their argument was so unbearable that the kindest thing was to pretend they were never there. So that is Bismuth. A warm, brilliant friend with a genuine grievance, bubbled away for thousands of years because a disagreement was easier to bury than to have. And a small boy who, faced with the same disagreement, chose to tell the truth instead. Now, from someone who was hidden away, let us go to someone who was simply left behind and told to wait. Let us talk about Spinel. I want you to picture a garden floating in space. Overgrown now, gone a bit wild, the way a garden does when nobody tends it. And standing in the middle of it, perfectly still, in exactly the pose she was put in, is a small pink gem. She has been standing like that for 6,000 years. That is Spinel, and she is from the film. And her story is, I think, the saddest single thing in the whole of Steven Universe, which is a competitive category. Spinel was made for one purpose, which was to make Pink Diamond happy. Pink, who we will talk about more in a bit, was the youngest and loneliest of the gem rulers, and someone made her a playmate. A friend whose entire reason for existing was to play games with her and keep her company and cheer her up. And for a long time, that is exactly what they did. The two of them played together in that garden, every day. This devoted, delighted little gem, and the lonely young diamond she adored. Spinel loved her completely. As far as Spinel was concerned, they were best friends. Forever. And that was the whole of the world. And then Pink got her own colony. She was given a planet, a real job, a future, and she was leaving. and Spinel wanted to go with her, the way you would want to go with your best friend. And Pink, who did not know how to let her down gently, or did not want to, or simply could not be bothered, told Spinel to play a game. She told her to stand in the garden, very still, and wait, and not move until she came back. And then she never came back. That is it. That is the whole terrible mechanism of it. Spinel stood there in that garden doing exactly what she was told, being good, being patient, waiting for all that time, not knowing she had been abandoned, just trusting that her friend would return, because her friend had told her to wait, and so she waited. And the garden grew up around her, and the centuries went by, and she did not move, because moving would have meant admitting that the person she loved was not coming back. What finally breaks the spell is the cruelest part. Spinel learns, eventually, through a message Steven sends out into the universe, what became of Pink. She learns that Pink is gone entirely, that she gave up her form to become Steven, and that in all the time since, Pink had a whole life, a whole new set of friends, a whole new everything, and never once came back for the gem she left standing in a garden. And Spinel's grief, all that buried longing of it, curdles instantly into rage. She comes to Earth with a weapon meant to poison the whole planet, determined to destroy everything Pink ever loved, because if she could not have her friend, then she will burn down whatever took her place. Now the film does eventually reach Spinel, and the way it reaches her is worth sitting with. Steven does not defeat her, not really. He listens to her. He goes with her back to that garden, and he lets her tell the whole story. The standing still, the waiting, the betrayal, and in the telling, something in her starts to come back to who she was before. Steven promises he will never abandon her, that he will try to make up for what his mother did. And while the ending is a bit complicated, and people argue about whether it is too neat, the core of it is that Spinel gets to stop being the gem in the garden. She gets to move again. And here is the lesson I take from her, and it is one that I think a great many people quietly need, though it sounds simple when you say it plainly. You cannot make someone come back by freezing yourself in the spot where they left you. Loyalty to a person who is gone can become a cage, and the bars of it are made of your own waiting. Spinel stood still all that time because moving felt like giving up on her friend, like betraying the love, like admitting the awful thing was true. And the standing still did not bring Pink back. Nothing was ever going to bring Pink back. All the waiting did was cost her an eternity she could have spent being a person. And we do this, in smaller ways, all the time. Not for thousands of years, mercifully, but the shape is the same. Someone leaves, a friend, a partner, a parent, a version of a life, and we stay exactly where they left us, emotionally frozen in the last pose, keeping everything the same because moving on feels like a betrayal. We keep waiting for the apology that is not coming, the explanation that will never arrive, the person who has, whether we can accept it or not, already gone. And it feels loyal. It feels like the love demands it. But the person we are being loyal to is not standing in the garden with us. They are off living their life, the way Pink was. We are the only ones still standing still. The thing Steven gives Spinel, the thing that lets her start moving again, is not a reason. He cannot give her a reason because there is not a good one. Pink left her because Pink was selfish and careless in that moment, and no explanation makes that hurt less. What he gives her instead is simply company, and the permission to stop waiting. The permission to grieve the thing that happened and then take a step and another, and become something other than the monument to her own abandonment. There is something quietly freeing in that, I think, even though the story is so sad, because it means the way out of the garden is not getting the closure you wanted. You almost never get that. The way out is deciding to move anyway, without the closure, carrying the hurt with you, because standing still was never going to fix it, and a life spent frozen is still a life spent. You are allowed to stop waiting. You are allowed to walk out of the garden even though nobody ever came back to release you. In fact, you are the only one who can. So that is spinel, a gem made to make someone happy, left standing in a garden for 6,000 years by the person she loved most, who finally learned that you cannot wait someone back into your life, and that walking away from the spot where they left you is not betrayal. It is just the only way to keep living. Now, the person who left spinel standing there, pink, came from a family with a great deal of its own damage, so let us go up the chain, all the way to the top, and talk about the diamonds. Let me introduce you to White Diamond, because she is one of the more unsettling characters the show ever made, and she does it almost entirely with a smile. White Diamond is the top of the whole gem hierarchy. The oldest, the most powerful, the one the others answer to. And she is, on the surface, serene. She glows so brightly you can barely look at her. She speaks gently. She talks about making everyone better, about removing their flaws, about helping them become perfect. And what that actually means, when you watch her do it, is that she takes other gems and erases the parts of them that make them themselves, drains the color and the personality and the will right out of them, turns them into blank, smiling extensions of her, and calls it an improvement. She has, in her own mind, only ever been generous. She is just helping. She is just making things perfect. The diamonds, as a group, are the rulers of the gem empire, and the show holds off on showing you the full shape of their family for a long time. But when it does, in the finale, what you find is not really a story about cosmic tyrants. It is a story about a deeply damaged family and the way damage travels through one. Blue Diamond is frozen in grief, has been for thousands of years, weeping over a loss she cannot move past. Yellow Diamond has gone the other way entirely, has buried every soft feeling she has so deep that all that is left is cold efficiency and the occasional flash of rage when something threatens to crack the surface. And both of them, you slowly realize, are terrified of White. They tiptoe around her. They try to limit how much time they spend near her. They dread setting her off, because setting her off means punishment, means being poofed or put away, means being told again that they are not good enough. And right at the center of it is Pink, the youngest, the one who could never measure up, the one who was constantly told she was childish and difficult and a disappointment, until she decided the only way to escape the family was to fake her own death and become someone else entirely. Which is a thing we will not fully unpick tonight, but which casts a long shadow over everyone. Pink ran. And nobody in that family ever stopped to ask why the youngest of them would rather erase herself completely than spend another day being told she was a flaw to be corrected. The thing the show is doing here, and doing brilliantly, is drawing a perfectly straight line through the whole sorry chain. White's obsession with perfection crushed Yellow and Blue. Yellow and Blue crushed, turned around, and crushed Pink. Because that is what you do with pressure when you have not dealt with it. You pass it down to whoever is below you. And Pink, crushed in her turn, went off and crushed others, left a gem standing in a garden for an age, started a war, hurt a great many people, all while believing she was the victim, which she also was. Everyone in that family is both. Everyone is someone's victim and someone else's source of pain, all the way up and all the way down. Nobody invented the cruelty. They all just inherited it and handed it on. And the lesson sitting in all of this is about perfectionism. And it is one I think gets dressed up as a virtue far too often. We talk about perfectionism like it is a charming flaw to admit in a job interview, like it just means you have high standards and care about doing things well. White Diamond is the show pulling the mask off that. Because perfectionism, the real thing, the deep version, is not about excellence. It is about fear. White is terrified, more than anything in the universe, of the possibility that she herself might be flawed. That is the engine under everything she does. And because she cannot tolerate the thought of imperfection in herself, she cannot tolerate it in anyone around her either. And so she spends her whole existence trying to grind the imperfection out of everyone she loves, in the name of helping them, while actually destroying the very things that make them worth loving. And demanding that kind of perfection from the people closest to you is its own quiet cruelty. It does not feel like cruelty from the inside. From the inside, it feels like caring. It feels like wanting the best for them. But to be on the receiving end of it, to be a yellow or a blue or a pink, to be loved by someone who cannot accept a single flaw in you, is to live with the constant low hum of never being enough. To learn that love is conditional on getting it right. To slowly bury the parts of yourself that might disappoint, until you are not really a person anymore, just a performance of the acceptable version of you. Which is exactly what White does to them, literally with her light. But plenty of families do a softer version of it without any magic at all. The way the show resolves it is the part I find genuinely moving, and it hinges on one small, enormous moment. Steven gets blue and yellow for the first time in thousands of years to actually tell White how they feel, to stop tiptoeing, to stop performing, to say out loud that her standards are crushing them, that they are sick of it, that the way she has run this family is the reason it fell apart. And White's first response is to do what she always. White Diamond's eventual response to Blue and Yellow's confrontation is to override them and turn them into puppets to pull Eds apart, because she is finally made to confront the one thing she has spent her entire existence running from, which is that she is not perfect, that she has a flaw, that she got things wrong. And this is the part the show is wise enough to know. That realization is not a defeat for White, it is the thing that frees her. The moment she can admit, I am not perfect, I do not actually know better than everyone, I have been wrong, is the moment she stops being a tyrant and starts being a person. The fear of imperfection was the prison. Admitting the imperfection is the door. There is a small bit of dialogue where she is almost wailing it, that she is supposed to know better, supposed to be better, supposed to make everything better. And the relief of finally not having to be all of that is written all over the scene. There is one last detail I love, because it is so honest. After the diamonds change, they all go to heal the corrupted gems, the ones who were damaged in the war, and the healing works. But the show makes a point of showing that the healed gems still carry marks from what happened to them. Scars, traces, features that the corruption left behind. The healing does not erase the past, it does not pretend the damage never happened, it just lets people move forward carrying it, which is the only honest version of healing there is. You do not get to go back to before, you just get to keep going, marked, and that is alright. So that is the diamonds. A family that mistook the crushing of every flaw for love, passing the pressure down through generations until it nearly destroyed all of them. Until the one at the very top finally admitted she was not perfect, and found that the admission was the only thing that could set the whole family free. Now, one of the soldiers who believed in that empire most completely, who built her entire self around being the perfect example of what it wanted, is worth talking about on her own. Let us go and find Jasper. Here is the contradiction at the heart of Jasper, and it is the thing that makes her tragic rather than just frightening. She is the gem everyone calls perfect, the flawless soldier, the ultimate quartz, built right where a Muthist was built wrong, and she is the one who completely falls apart. Jasper comes out of a different kind of kindergarten than a Muthist did. One brought online during the war specifically to churn out soldiers fast, and she is held up as the best of them. Big, strong, exactly what the Empire wanted a warrior to be. Where a Muthist spent her whole life feeling defective, Jasper got to be the opposite, the gold standard, the one whose body matched her purpose perfectly. And you would think that would make her the most secure gem in the show. It makes her the least, because Jasper does not just fight, Jasper is the fight. She has built her entire sense of who she is on being a warrior, on being strong, on having enemies to crush and battles to win. Strength is not something she has, it is the whole of what she is. And the trouble with building yourself entirely out of opposition is that you need an opponent to exist. You need the war to keep going. You need someone to be against, because without the against, there is no you. We have already seen the worst of what that drives her to in the Lapis section, the way she talked Lapis into that poisonous fusion in her hunger for more power. I will not go back over that ground. But the thread to follow with Jasper specifically is her relationship to Rose, or rather to the idea of Rose as the enemy who shattered her diamond. For Jasper, hating Rose, wanting to destroy Rose, avenging Pink, that is the spine of her entire identity. It is what she is for. And so when she finally comes face to face with Stephen, who carries Rose's gem, she is almost relieved. Here is the enemy. Here is the fight she was made for. Everything makes sense again. And then the ground gets pulled out from under her, the same way it gets pulled out from under everyone in this show eventually. Because it turns out the war was not what she thought. Her diamond Pink was never really shattered by some rebel monster. The whole story Jasper organized her existence around was, in a sense, never true. The enemy she defined herself against does not exist in the shape she believed. And a gem, who is nothing but a fight, when she finds out there is no real fight to be had, has nothing left to stand on. What happens to her in the epilogue is genuinely hard to watch. And I think it is the show being unflinchingly honest about where this kind of self-destruction leads. Out in the wilds, alone, with no war and no purpose and no enemy worthy of her, Jasper lets herself become corrupted. Corruption, in the show, is this terrible fate where a gem loses their mind and their form and becomes a sort of beast, and it usually happens to gems against their will. Jasper essentially walks into it. She would rather become a monster than face a world where the thing she built herself out of has turned to dust in her hands. She would rather be a beast with a clear enemy than a person with no idea who she is. And that is the lesson, and it is a sharp one, sharper than most of the others tonight. If you build your entire self on beating someone, or on being the strongest, or on winning some particular fight, then you have nothing the moment that fight ends. An identity made only of opposition cannot survive peace. It needs the enemy. It needs the struggle. And so, on some level, it cannot ever let the struggle end. Because the end of the struggle is the end of you. I think most of us know someone a bit like this. In a much lower key. The person whose whole personality is what they are against. The one who needs an enemy, a rival, a villain, a thing to be furious about, and who seems almost lost when they do not have one, who will find a new one rather than sit in the strange quiet of having nothing to fight. And it is not that being against bad things is wrong. Plenty of things deserve to be opposed. It is that, if the opposition is all there is, if you scrape away the enemy and find there is no you underneath, then you are in real trouble, because you will start needing the enemy to exist. You will start protecting the very thing you claim to be fighting. Because without it, you do not know who you are. There is something almost unbearably sad in Jasper choosing corruption. When you hold it up against Amethyst from earlier, two quartzes made for the same purpose, one made wrong, who spent her life believing she was worthless and slowly, painfully learned that her worth was never about the conditions of her making. And one made right, the perfect specimen, who never had to question her worth because the Empire handed it to her on a plate, in the form of a war and an enemy and a clear job to do. And it is the perfect one who shatters when the war goes away, because she never built anything underneath the role. She never became a person. She only ever became a weapon. And a weapon with no battle left is just a thing rusting in a field. The show does, mercifully, leave a door open for her. By the very end, after the diamonds heal everyone, Jasper is among those given a chance at something else, carrying her scars like all the rest. Whether she ever really builds a self that is not just a fight, the show leaves a bit open, which feels right. That is not the kind of thing that gets resolved in one tidy moment. Learning to exist without an enemy, when the enemy was your whole identity, is the work of a very long time, if it happens at all. So that is Jasper, the perfect soldier who turned out to be the most hollow gem of all, because she built herself entirely out of a fight. And when the fight disappeared, there was nothing underneath to hold her up. A warning, really, about what happens when you let what you are against become the whole of what you are. Now, that war, and that corruption, and all of this old damage eventually lands on one person who has to carry the weight of all of it. And that brings us at last to Stephen himself, Let us talk about what the show does with him at the very end. This, for me, is where the show quietly becomes something rare. And it starts with the most ordinary thing imaginable: a teenager going to the doctor for the first time. Steven Universe Future is the epilogue, the season that comes after everything is supposedly fixed. The war is over, the Empire has reformed, the corrupted gems have been healed, the big villains have become, against all odds, family. By every measure of the story, Steven grew up inside, he won. He saved everyone, and the show does something almost nobody has the nerve to do, which is to ask what happens to the boy who spent his entire childhood saving everyone once there is no one left to save. The answer, it turns out, is that he falls apart. Quietly at first, and then not quietly at all. Because Steven, this whole time, has been the helper. That is his role, his identity, the thing he is for. From the time he was small, he has been the one who fixes things, who heals people, who carries his dead mother's legacy, who absorbs everyone else's pain and turns it into a solution. He is, as someone puts it, trying to be everything for everybody. And he has never once stopped to deal with anything that happened to him along the way, because there was always someone else who needed him more. There was always another crisis, another gem to reach, another person to save. His own feelings could wait. They have been waiting for years. And now the crises have stopped, and all of that buried stuff has nowhere to go but up. He goes to the doctor, and for the first time in his life, someone checks him over and finds that he is physically fine. And yet things keep happening to him that are not fine at all. He starts glowing pink. He starts overreacting to small stresses in enormous, frightening ways, his body surging with powers he cannot control. He gets bigger when he is angry. Connie's mother, who is a doctor, frames it for what it is: the long-delayed bill coming due for years of difficult experiences that never got processed. The powers everyone keeps treating as a gift she recognizes as something much more worrying. They are the symptoms of someone whose mind has been carrying far too much for far too long, finally buckling under the weight. There is a thread through these final episodes that I find almost too real, where Steven keeps insisting to everyone that everything is fine. There is even an episode called exactly that, Everything's Fine. And he says it through gritted teeth, glowing, cracking apart, doing the thing so many of us do, which is to perform being okay so hard that we cannot admit, even to ourselves, that we are not. He has spent his whole life being the strong one, the one who holds it together for everyone else. And so the idea that he might be the one who needs holding is almost unthinkable to him. Asking for help is not in his vocabulary. Help is something he gives. It is not something he was ever taught to receive. And it builds and builds until in the second to last episode it all comes out at once and Steven loses control completely and turns into a giant monster. An actual kaiju towering over his hometown, a danger to everyone, the very thing he spent his life protecting people from. And I want to be careful about how I describe what happens next, because it is the most important moment in the whole show, and the show handles it with enormous care. His family does not fight him. They do not try to defeat the monster or subdue it or talk it down. They simply reach him. They surround him and they hold on, and they tell him, over and over, that he does not have to carry all of this alone, that they should have seen how much he was struggling, that they are going to help him, and slowly, held by the people who love him, the monster comes apart, and Steven comes back. Now, some people criticize that ending when it aired, said that a hug cannot cure trauma, that it was too simple, that you do not just love someone better and send them on their way. And I understand the worry, but I think it misreads what the show actually does, because the show is very clear that the hug does not cure him. The very next episode skips forward several months, and Steven mentions, almost in passing, that he has a therapist now, someone he video calls while he is out on the road. The hug did not fix him. The hug was the moment he finally let people in. The therapy is the actual work, the slow ongoing business of dealing with what he buried. And the show makes a point of telling you it is still happening, that he is still managing it, that the breakdown was not a one-off event with a tidy resolution, but the start of a long road he is now actually on. And the lesson in all of this is, I think, one of the most quietly important things the show ever says. And it is aimed squarely at every person who's ever been the strong one. The person who saves everyone else needs saving too. The helper needs help. The one who holds it all together is allowed to fall apart. And being able to let other people catch you when you do is not a weakness. It might be the bravest thing you ever do, because there is a particular trap that catches kind people, caring people, capable people. And it is this: you get so good at being the one who gives that you forget how to receive. You become the friend everyone comes to, the one who always copes, the one who's always fine, and the better you get at it, the more impossible it becomes to admit when you are not. Because the whole structure of your relationships is built on you being the steady one. And so you carry it alone. You glow pink, and you insist everything is fine, and you grow bigger and angrier and more frightened. And you tell no one, because telling someone would mean being the one who needs something. And you do not know how to be that. Stephen nearly destroys his entire town because he could not say the words, "I am not okay, I need help." What saves him, in the end, is not strength. He has plenty of strength. Strength is the problem. What saves him is letting himself be weak in front of the people who love him, and discovering that they do not love him any less for it. That they were not loving him because he was useful, because he fixed things, because he was always fine. They were loving him for himself, and they would much rather have the real him, struggling and honest, than the performance of the boy who never needed anything. I find that genuinely moving, and not in a way that builds to some big crescendo, just in a quiet way that sits with you. The idea that you are allowed to be the one who needs catching. That accepting help is not a failure of the strength you are so proud of, but a different and harder kind of strength altogether. And that the people who love you, the real ones, would rather you let them in than keep glowing pink and insisting through gritted teeth that everything is fine. So that is Steven Universe Future. The story of what happens when the boy who saved everyone finally has to let himself be saved. The show could have ended on the big victory, all wrapped up, the hero triumphant. Instead, it stayed for the quiet, harder ending. The one about a kid learning that needing help is part of being a person, and that you do not have to be everything for everybody, and that it is all right at long last to put some of it down. A lot of what he was carrying came from his mother, the woman whose gem he was born with, and she is worth understanding on her own, because she might be the most complicated person the whole show ever made. So before we close, let us talk about Rose. Rose Quartz has been hovering at the edge of nearly every story we have told tonight. She is the one Pearl could not stop grieving, the one Greg loved, the one who bubbled bismuth away rather than have the argument, the one who left Spinal standing in a garden, back when she was someone else entirely. She is everywhere, and she is gone, and the closer you look at her, the harder she gets to hold, which is, I think, exactly the point. This is the part the show waits a very long time to tell you, and I will keep the mechanics light because we have brushed against them all night. Rose Quartz was not who anyone thought she was. Rose Quartz was Pink Diamond, the youngest of those gem rulers we talked about, the one who was crushed by her family, who could not bear the empire she was born into, faked her own death and became a rebel leader named Rose so that she could fight for the planet she had fallen in love with. The kind, gentle, beloved figure that Pearl and Garnet and Amethyst followed into war was, underneath, one of the very tyrants they were rebelling against in disguise, hiding from everyone who trusted her. And when this comes out, late in the show, it does not land as a fun twist. It lands as a kind of grief, because suddenly everything Rose ever did has two readings at once, and you cannot unsee either of them. On one reading, she is a hero. She looked at an empire that strip-mined planets and crushed its own people into castes and treated whole worlds as resources to be consumed, and she said no. She gave up the highest position in that entire system, gave up being a diamond, to fight for a planet full of creatures she was supposed to see as beneath her. She fought for the right of gems to be themselves, to fuse who they loved, to live free of the hierarchy. People built whole lives on the courage of that. Garnet exists openly, joyfully. Because Rose made Garnet exist as a fusion because Ruby and Sapphire chose to fuse. And Rose created a world where that fusion was allowed. Rose almost everything, and she did it anyway. And on the other reading, running right alongside it, she caused an enormous amount of harm, and a lot of it she never cleaned up. She abandoned Spinel. She bubbled bismuth and lied about it for thousands of years. She kept secrets from Pearl, the person who loved her most, and let Pearl carry the weight of those secrets in silence. She started a war, which, however just, got a great many gems shattered. And she did all of this while wearing a borrowed ID. And she did all of this while wearing a borrowed identity, never quite letting anyone but Pearl, even the people closest to her, know who she actually was, trying to work out whether his mother was a saint or a war criminal, and the honest answer the show gives him is, well, both, sort of, depending on where you're standing. What I find quietly brilliant is that the show refuses to resolve this for you. It would have been so easy to land on one side. Make her secretly evil all along, and the rebellion was a lie. Or make her secretly blameless, and explain away every cruel thing. Plenty of stories would have done one or the other, because we like our people to be sortable, hero or villain, good or bad, and it is uncomfortable when they will not sit still in one box. Steven Universe just lets her be a mess. A person who genuinely meant well, who did real good in the world, and who also genuinely hurt people. Badly, sometimes carelessly, and never fully reckoned with it. Both things, at once, forever. And that is the lesson sitting inside Rose, and it might be the most grown-up one in the whole show. Meaning well does not cancel out the harm you cause, and causing harm does not cancel out the good you did. People are not sortable. The same person who fights bravely for a cause can be the person who could not be honest with the people who loved her. The same person who builds a freer world for others. Rose Quartz built a freer world for others and left someone, Spinel, standing in a garden because she could not deal with them honestly. Are also not a magic spell that undoes the wreckage left behind when you act carelessly. I think we resist this idea, generally, because it is genuinely uncomfortable to hold. We want the people we love to be all good, so we can love them cleanly. We want the people who hurt us to be all bad, so we can be angry at them cleanly. And real people, almost without exception, refuse to cooperate. The parent who loved you and also damaged you. The friend who was there for you and also let you down badly. Ourselves, if we are honest, the times we meant well and hurt someone anyway, and the times we did real good without ever quite deserving the halo. Rose is the show holding all of that up and saying this is what a person actually is. Not a hero. Not a villain. A tangle of genuine love and real harm, and the work is learning to see the whole tangle without flattening it into something simpler than the truth. There is something freeing in that too, mind you, underneath how uncomfortable it is. Because if meaning well does not erase harm, then it is also true that your worst moments do not erase your best ones. You can have hurt people, really hurt them, and still have done good, still be capable of good, still be worth something. The tangle goes both ways. Rose is not redeemed by her good deeds, and she is not condemned by her bad ones. She is just held, in full, as the complicated person she was, and there is a strange mercy in being seen that, completely, flaws and all, rather than sorted into a box. And what Steven eventually does with all of this is, I think, the healthiest possible response. And it points us straight at where we are going next. He stops trying to decide whether his mother was good or bad. He stops trying to live up to her. And he stops trying to atone for her. He decides instead that whatever she was, he gets to be himself. That her tangle is hers, and his life is his. And he does not have to spend it either worshipping her memory or paying off her debts. Which is a remarkably hard thing to do when the person in question is your own parent. And it is the thing that finally lets him become his own person. So that is Rose. The hero who was also a tyrant, the gentle leader who was also careless with the people who loved her, the mother who left her son a legacy so tangled he spent years trying to work out whether to be proud of it or ashamed of it. A person, in other words. meaning well and causing harm, both at once, the way people do. And it all comes down, in the end, to the boy who inherited every bit of it, and what he finally learns to do with it. So let us close where the show closes, with Stephen. Let me ease into this last one through Greg, because I think it is the gentlest way in. There is an episode near the very end called Mr. Universe, where Greg takes Stephen out on the road, just the two of them, driving around in the van, going back to the places Greg came from. And underneath the road trip is this very soft, very ordinary idea that the show has been building towards without ever quite saying out loud, which is that Stephen is allowed to just be a person, not a savior, not a legacy, not the answer to everyone's problems, just a kid in a van with his dad working out who he is like anybody else. Because that is the thing Stephen has never been allowed to be, the whole way through. From the moment he was small, he was the one who fixes things. He inherited his mother's gem, and along with it, the sense that he had inherited her job, her debts, her people, her war. He grew up believing his worth was bound up entirely in what he could do for others, in healing them and saving them, and being everything for everybody, which we talked about a moment ago. And the great quiet project of the very end of the show is to gently take all of that off him, to let him put it down, to tell him that he does not have to earn his place in the world by being useful. That is the lesson. And I have saved it for last, not because it is the grandest, but because it is the one that quietly sits underneath all the others. You are allowed to exist for your own sake, not for what you do for other people, not for how much you help, or fix, or carry, or heal, just for being you. Your worth is not your usefulness. And I think that one lands so hard because it is the lie sitting underneath so many of the others we have talked about tonight. The reason Amuthis feared she was a mistake, the reason Pearl could not stop performing her devotion, the reason White Diamond needed everyone around her to be flawless, is all some version of the same quiet fear, that you have to be a certain thing, do a certain amount, be useful enough, or good enough, or impressive enough to have earned the right to be here at all, as though existing were a bill you have to keep paying forever, or risk having it all taken back. And Stephen, of everyone, has paid it harder than anyone. He has healed more, saved more, carried more, and he still stands there at the end, terrified that the moment he stops paying, the love will be repossessed. The show looks at that fear, the one a great many of us carry around without ever quite naming it, and it just gently sets it down. It tells him, and it tells us, that there was never a bill, that you do not have to earn your place by being good for something, that the people who actually love you were never keeping a tally, and would honestly be a bit horrified to learn you thought they were. You got to be here for free the whole time. You just could not let yourself believe it. And I think that one might be the hardest of all of them to actually believe deep down where it counts, because so much of the world runs on the other message. We are praised for what we produce, valued for what we contribute, measured by what we are good for. From very early on, a lot of us absorb the idea that we have to be useful to deserve to be here, that love has to be earned by being helpful or impressive or good, that if we ever stopped being able to do things for people, the love would dry up. And Stephen, who is more useful than anyone, who can literally heal people with his own body, takes that belief to its furthest possible point, and it nearly destroys him. As we saw. Because if your worth is your usefulness, then the moment you are not needed, you are worthless, and that is a terrifying way to live. What the show gives him, in the end, is permission. Permission to not be needed. Permission to leave. Because the final thing Stephen does, after everything, is get in his car and drive away from the town where he grew up, away from the gems, away from the role, to go and live, as the show puts it, like a normal person, to go and figure out who he is when nobody needs rescuing. And it is not framed as a sad ending or a triumphant one, it is just right. It is a kid who spent his whole life being everything for everybody, finally getting to go and find out what he wants for himself. And there is a lovely, frightened little moment underneath it, where Stephen worries that if he leaves, the gems will not miss him. That without him there to need, the love will fade. Because he still, even now, half believes that he was loved for being useful. And the answer the show gives him is that, of course, they will miss him. Not the help. Him. They love him, not the function he served. And once he believes that, really believes it, he is free to go. Because he finally understands that the love was never conditional on the saving. It was just love, the whole time, for the person and not the use. You can see all the threads of the night gathering here, quietly, without me having to spell them out. Amethyst, learning that the place she came from did not decide her worth. Pearl, learning to be her own person rather than the shadow of someone she lost. The diamonds, learning that demanding perfection is not the same as love. Rose, leaving behind a tangle that Stephen finally decided he did not have to carry. All of it pointing at the same gentle place, that you are allowed to be a person, flawed and ordinary and unfinished, loved for yourself rather than for what you can do, that you do not have to earn your way into mattering, you already matter. You were never on probation. I do not want to oversell it because the show never oversells it. It does not end with fireworks or a grand speech about the meaning of everything. It ends with a kid driving off down a road, a bit nervous, a bit excited, off to be ordinary, which is the thing he was never allowed to be. And there is something deeply restful in that, to me. The idea that the happy ending is not becoming the strongest, or saving the most people, or earning the most love. The happy ending is being allowed to just be yourself, and trusting that the people who love you will still be there, because they were never loving you for the saving in the first place. For a show about magic rocks who fight space tyrants, that is a remarkably quiet note to go out on. A boy in a car, off to live a small, ordinary life, finally believing he is allowed to, and honestly, no notes. I think that is exactly right. So that is Stephen, the one who carried everyone, who learned at long last that he was allowed to put it down, and to exist for no reason at all except that he was here, and that was enough, which it always was, which it always is, for all of us, even when we cannot quite bring ourselves to believe it. Now, I could happily keep going until the sun comes up because there are dozens of these I have not touched tonight. There is a whole story about the cluster, and one about Stephen's relationship with his own mother's old enemies, and any number of small gems, with their own quiet lessons, and I will probably end up making other videos about a fair few of them. But let me give you just one more before we drift off, because it is one of my favorites, and it never seems to get talked about enough. Deep underground on the gem homeworld, in an old abandoned kindergarten that nobody uses anymore, there is a little group of gems hiding in the dark. And they are hiding because if they were found, they would be shattered. Not for anything they did, just for what they are. They are called the off colors, and the show could not have come up with a more fitting name. Each of them is, by the Empire's standards, a defect. There is rhodonite, who is a fusion of a ruby, and there is rhodonite, who is a fusion of a ruby and a pearl who belong to the same owner, morganite, and who got replaced the moment they were caught enjoying being together, because a fusion like that is not supposed to exist. There are the rutile twins, a single gem that came out split into two during formation, conjoined, who were left alone because all the other rutiles fled and left them. Member sapphires are meant to see the future. Hers does not work like that. Padpuredshu can only see slightly into the past. She has visions, lovely, detailed visions of things that have already happened, announced a few seconds too late to be any use to anyone. And there is Fluorite, an enormous, gentle fusion of 6 different gems, who speaks so slowly that a single sentence can take her the better part of a minute, and who is one of the kindest characters in the whole show. That word, defective, is the same one that haunted Amethyst, and I will not go back over all of that, because we have already spent time on the difference between where you come from and what you are worth. The thread I want to pull here is a slightly different one, because the off-colors are not just gems who were made wrong. They are gems who do not fit, in a society with absolutely no room for anyone who does not fit, and who have been told their whole existence that there is no place for them anywhere. And the thing they discover, hiding in that dark kindergarten, is each other. That is the first half of what I love about them. On their own, each of them is isolated, hunted, convinced they are an aberration. Together they are a family. A slightly ramshackle, deeply odd, genuinely loving little family, where Rhodonite frets over everyone, and the Rutiel twins go out looking for other lost gems to rescue. And Flowrite takes a full minute to tell you she cares about you and means every slow second of it. And Padpuraid Chu cheerfully narrates things that happened a moment ago as though they are breaking news. They do not fit the world they were born into, but they fit each other, and that turns out to be the thing that matters. And then there is Lars, which is the second half, and the part that makes me a bit emotional if I'm honest. Lars Burigu is a human teenager from Steven's hometown, and for most of the show he is frankly a bit of a pain. He is the insecure cool kid wannabe, the one who is desperate to be liked by the right people, who is embarrassed by anyone uncool, who pushes away the people who actually care about him because he is so busy trying to be someone he is not. He never fits in either, but his version of not fitting is to perform fitting in as hard as he can and to feel like a fraud the whole time. He's not a villain. He is just a frightened kid who does not believe he is worth much, hiding it under a layer of cool that fools nobody, least of all himself. And then, through a long chain of events I will not lay out in full, Lars ends up on the gem homeworld of all places, stranded among the off-colors. And in the middle of an escape, he does something that surprises everyone, including himself. He throws himself in the way of danger to protect these gems he has only just met, and he dies doing it. Actually dies. And Steven, in his grief, brings him back through his own strange healing powers, and Lars returns changed. Pink now. A bit different, having been somewhere and come back. But the real change is not the color. The real change is what he does next. Because the boy who never believed he was worth anything, who never fit anywhere, who spent his whole life performing for people who did not really see him, becomes the captain of the off-colors. He leads them. He steals a ship, the Sun Incinerator, and he flies these misfit gems off the homeworld that wanted to shatter them. And he gives each of them a proper job, a place, a role. Padpuradsha, whose useless backwards visions nobody ever wanted, becomes the technical advisor. Slow, gentle, Flowrite becomes the chief engineer. The Rutiel twins steer the ship. Anxious Rhodonite runs a strategy. And Lars, the kid who never fit, becomes exactly the right leader for a crew of people who do not fit anywhere, because he knows in his bones what it is to be told there is no place for you, and he is not going to let that happen to any of them. And that is the lesson, and it is such a warm one to end the proper character bits on. The ones who do not fit are not broken. They have just not found their people yet. Padpuradshu's visions are useless on a home world that only values seeing the future, and perfectly lovely among friends who are happy to hear what just happened narrated with such delight. Flowrite's slowness is a defect to an empire that wants speed and efficiency, and a gift to a family that has all the time in the world to listen. The Rutiel twins, the fusion of a ruby and a pearl, the slow caterpillar of 6 gems, every single thing the world called wrong about them, turns out to be perfectly fine, lovely even, the moment they are among people who are glad they exist. Nothing about them had to change. They just had to find the others like them. And I think a lot of people need to hear that, the version of it without the space rocks. That the feeling of not fitting in is so often not a fact about you, but a fact about the room you happen to be standing in. That you can be the wrong shape for one world and exactly the right shape for another. That the qualities you have been taught to hide, the slowness, the oddness, the way your particular gift does not match what is being asked of you, might be precisely the things that someone, somewhere, is going to be overjoyed to have around. You are not too much, or too little, or too strange. You just have not found your off colors yet. And when you do, you might be amazed how quickly the defect turns into the thing they love you for. And there is something lovely in Lars. On top of all that, the idea that the person who never fit anywhere can turn out to be the best possible leader for the ones who do not fit. Because he understands them from the inside. The very thing that made him miserable, all those years of feeling like an outsider, becomes the thing that lets him build a place where nobody else has to feel that way. His wound becomes the doorway to the family, which is not the show promising that suffering pays off neatly, because it does not always. It is something gentler than that. It is just saying that the parts of you that never fit are not wasted. They might be exactly what someone needs you to have been through. So that is Lars and the off-colors. A handful of gems the universe called defective, who found out they fit each other perfectly, led by a boy who never fit anywhere, and turned that into the thing that saved them all. A good note, I think, to start drifting off on. So there we are. Or there we mostly are anyway, because like I said, this show has more in it than any one quiet ramble could hope to cover. It is a funny thing, when you lay it all out next to each other like we have tonight. A show about magic rocks from space with laser swords and a war that happened thousands of years ago, and a giant temple shaped like a woman on a beach. And under every single bit of it, the same handful of very small, very human things keep turning up. That love is something you build, deliberately. And the building is the love. That where you came from does not get the final word on what you are worth. That you can change your mind and it is not a weakness. That you can love someone forever and still have to become your own person. That real love takes work. And the work is the point. That holding someone down to feel safe just means you are underwater too. That closeness should be chosen gently, again and again. That making a disagreement disappear costs more than just having it. That you cannot wait someone back into your life. That demanding perfection is its own kind of cruelty. That a self built only out of a fight has nothing left when the fight ends. That the helper needs help too. That people are a tangle of good and harm, and that is all right. That you are allowed to exist for your own sake. And that the ones who do not fit are not broken, they have just not found their people yet. I do not think any of those are things you only need to hear once. I think they are the sort of thing you have to keep being reminded of quietly on ordinary nights, because the world is very good at making you forget them. And there is something nice, to me, about a daft cartoon being the thing that does the reminding. No big lecture. No one wagging a finger at you about how to live. Just a story told with an enormous amount of care that happens to keep slipping these true things in around the edges while you are watching the pretty colors. If you are still awake, which, no judgment, either way, then you might have noticed that none of these characters get it right cleanly. Garnet comes apart and has to put herself back together. Pearl takes 1,000 years and then some. Stephen nearly destroys his whole town before he can say the words out loud. Nobody on this show arrives anywhere in one neat go. They get there in pieces, an inch at a time, with a lot of stumbling, which is the only honest way anyone ever gets anywhere with any of this. And I find that more comforting than if they had got it right the first time, because that is what it actually looks like, isn't it? Not a clean transformation, just a slow, patient, imperfect business of slowly becoming a slightly better version of yourself, with the people who love you nearby, on a long enough timeline. There are so many more of these I want to get to. There is the whole story of the cluster, this enormous buried thing made of countless shattered gems, and what Stephen does when he finally meets it, which is one of the loveliest things in the show. There is more to say about Connie, about Sadie, about Greg, on his own, about the corrupted gems and what their healing really meant. There is a whole video in me, probably just about the songs, because this show used music to say things words could not, over and over. I will get to them, one quiet night at a time, if you fancy coming back for them. But not tonight. Tonight we have done plenty. And the point was never to get to the end of anything. Because that is rather the secret of this whole show, if you ask me. And it is a good thing to drift off on. Steven Universe was never really about winning. The war is over by the end, sure, and the Empire reforms, and the villains become family, but none of that is the actual ending. The actual ending is a boy driving off down a road to go and be ordinary, finally believing he is allowed to. It is not about being the strongest, or saving the most people, or being the most useful person in the room. It is about being allowed to just be here, to be a person, flawed and unfinished and loved anyway, for no particular reason except that you are. Which is, when you take all the space rocks out of it, about the kindest thing a story can tell you. So whatever shape you came out of, whatever you were told you were too much of or not enough of, whatever you have been carrying that you have not let yourself put down, whatever room you are standing in that does not quite fit you, it is all right. You are allowed to build something. You are allowed to change your mind. You are allowed to need help. You are allowed to stop standing still in the garden, and you are allowed, more than anything, to simply exist for your own sake, with no case to make for why you deserve to. That is the whole of it, really. A show about magic rocks, quietly telling you that you are okay as you are. I have watched it more times than I can count. And that is the thing. I take away every single time, right? That is more than enough from me. Thank you for spending this stretch of the night here with me. Sleep well whenever you get there. Be kind to yourself in the morning. And I will see you next time for more of these on some other quiet night when neither of us can sleep. Good night.